Welcome to Money Matriarchs with Dr. Laura Mattia, where we inspire you to harness the power of money for good. Together, we will hear motivational stories, meet encouraging role models, and explore financial strategies that can make a difference in our lives, our families, and beyond. We're in this together. Now, please welcome your host, Dr. Laura.
I have two questions for you today. The first is, if in fact you did not have to contribute to the family's financial income, you had other sources of financial income, would you even try? Second question is, what if you actually weren't legally supposed to work? What if nobody expected you to work because legally you couldn't even work in the profession you were trained in? Would you still try? Well, today's guest has an interesting journey. She has taken on her passions, her interests, and has applied them in a way where she has been a very successful entrepreneur. And I am excited to introduce you to her. Her name is Carolyn Alves, and I can tell you that you're going to enjoy her story. So, welcome, Carolyn.
Thanks, Laura. I appreciate that. I'm
Mm.
excited to be here and appreciate it.
Good. So when you moved to the United States, as your husband's job moved you here, you had a profession back in Canada and you couldn't apply it here. You weren't allowed to legally work. So you had these obstacles and these challenges about what should you do? And nobody really expected you to either. I don't think even your husband necessarily expected you to do anything, but you being the person you are and the can do person and wanting to really contribute did some very interesting things. Can you tell me what even motivates you?
Sure. I guess if I think back, you're right. I didn't have to go to work for the typical financial reasons. I actually legally could not work here. So what motivates me? I guess a lot going back in time. My mom was a single working mom. She probably instilled that hard work ethic into me, always wanting to be independent. So I would say that was a driving factor, probably looking back. I did have a career. I did, put myself through college and became a dental hygienist, did that for 20 years. And then, in the future had kids. So my daughters motivate me, I guess. I have two daughters, as do you. And I wanted to be a good role model for them. I wanted to be someone they could look up to and see me contributing. Of course, not to say that being a work from home mom isn't contributing. We all know that's one of the hardest jobs out there. But when you're not being there's something that comes from being financially a contributor as well, maybe some self-worth and an identity. So that's probably what was a contributing motivator.
Actually, as you're talking about that, I mean, there's so many things that are going through my mind. Some of the work that I do with the not-for-profit types of organizations, and I work with women that maybe were once married. For whatever reason, they're not married anymore. Maybe it was either divorce or widow, and they did not develop their financial skills, and they did not develop their own sense of worth. It's really quite interesting when I talk to them about making good financial decisions and choices. They don't even feel like they're entitled to make those choices. And then I've talked to some women also who have chosen the route. And again, I agree with you. Staying at home, taking care of children is by far the most difficult job I could ever imagine. Maybe that's part of the reason why I've always worked is a bit of an escape. I wanted to go to the bathroom by myself.
Yes.
But the whole idea of being able to say, what, I contributed also, and therefore I'm entitled to help make decisions in the household.
Sure.
Because I've met some women who, whether the marriage turned slightly abusive, or even not so. I've talked to women where they've said, I don't feel like I have the right to ask how much we've saved, or I don't feel like I have the
Wow.
right to, and that's very scary, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's sad.
Yeah, because it's almost like they feel
Taken care of.
And honestly, Carolyn, I've had young women say this to me fairly recently, who told me, I don't feel like I have a right to question his choices or his decisions.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
No, I can't.
Yeah.
I think you have to be, if you're married, because not everybody is, but
Mhm.
if you are, I really believe in a partnership. To me, my husband's my best friend. So if he tells me no, I say, yes, because you can't just tell me no. I need a reason. I need
Well, the
to,
yin and the yang
yeah.
kind of sometimes comes out with a better answer, right?
Right, right. Let's talk about it. Yeah. I can't, it's a sad, what you're saying is very sad to
Yeah.
me, but I can see how it can happen. I can see how if you take a path, you could go down that road and suddenly it stops being, if you stop asking questions, you stop getting answers. And then suddenly you're lost, right? I could
Mhm.
see how financially that would be able to happen.
So I do think that what we're doing for our girls, on one hand, there were times when I was working where I felt guilty that I wasn't
Mhm.
at home doting on them all the time. On the other hand, I do know that I serve for them as a bit of a role model where they know that they can do something. So,
Definitely.
so it must have been so frustrating for you when you moved to the United States. You were skilled, you had a profession, to just say, okay, I guess I can't do that. Can you tell us what you were initially thinking when you first?
Sure. I mean, and definitely. So even prior to moving to the U.S., we've moved around a few times, and I was always working, as you said, and my kids were still young. So I, we left the U.S. and went to the U.K. My husband was kind of asked to go to the U.K., so I had to give up my career. It was
So you were initially Canadian citizens, you came to the US, then you went to England.
No, we
You
went from Canada, we went to the UK first. So
Okay.
that's when I had to give up my career. That's when, and it was a joint decision. We decided together that that would be the only way we could go as well, because I couldn't work there either. I couldn't work, but I could learn. I went back to school when I was there. I took an interior design class and I volunteered. There's other ways to make yourself
A
a
contributor.
contributor to the family, but I
Mm.
wasn't, I wasn't getting paid. And when you're not getting paid, it does feel a little bit like it doesn't matter as much,
Mm.
but I was contributing it was impactful in our family. It made me happy. It made my kids see that I was out doing things.
Mm.
I was volunteering at the school so much that someone actually thought I worked there. And so, yeah, so it's,
Yes, that's how I initially met you, right?
yes, and coming to the US, it just, there was other things that happened. I was always taking care of the family, and
Mm.
you know that was sort of my job. So
But that interior design, I think, never left you because obviously, you took that passion for, making a home beautiful. And of course, you've done that with your own home, but also how do you make other living spaces really attractive and want to make people stay there? And so, can you tell us a little bit about how you wound up getting interested in real estate? Because really, what I also don't know if I specifically said in my introduction was really you're a maven in the real estate world and have done some really cool things in real estate.
well, thanks. And I guess I don't really think of myself as a maven, but I'm gonna take that and thank you. Yeah, I mean, so interior design was kind of a piece of something that was a passion for me, but going into the real estate, that sort of happened by accident, if you will, that it became a business. I was looking for something to do. The kids were at an age where they were more independent. I could do something for me and for us. And we purchased this property that was meant to be where we might retire to, and we would rent it out. And it sort of sparked a passion. Suddenly, I saw that you could make money from this property. It would pay for itself, but it also had a little bit of an income from it. And once I saw that, it was like, wait, it wasn't a lot of money, but it was a little bit. And I thought, well, if I can buy 10 of these, I can suddenly have enough money that it matters now. That would matter. And so that's kind of what happened. That sparked a passion. But because so we started with that single family homes, and then I thought, well, this is great, but it's not that fun because, what about a beach house that I could use that passion for design to kind of say, so a VRBO rental or Airbnb kind of style, something that people would come stay at and I could keep and decorate and make pretty, and it would be more fun. And my husband, who's all business, said, no, that's not going to make any sense. No. And I was adamant I could make it work. And he said, okay, well, bring me a business plan and prove it. So that was all I needed to hear, was that little bit of go do it. And I did. And I scoured the market, and I ended up finding this beach house, if you will, that made sense. But I had to, it was a lot of work to prove it. I had to figure out how much money you could make on a rental, and how often could I rent it. And then we bought it, and the rest is history. You're now I'm dealing in a business of turns that are happening more often, and people coming to stay for a week, and I have cleaners and all these people I'm dealing with. So it opened a new world.
Before we go there, I want to talk about that first beach house. So, because I recall you telling me a story that he said, okay, fine, like this business plan looks like it might work, but it's all going to just stay the way it is. The furniture is going to stay the way it is and everything. And you were just horrified about that.
Exactly. So that is a funny story. And it's kind of, it was, a little bit of a teaching moment, if you will, too, for my daughter. So yeah, we bought this house and it was furnished. So, being frugal, you'd say, just my husband was like, it's perfect, leave it as it is. And I'm telling you, Laura, it had green checkered couches, white rug that was so dirty, it was no longer white. That just gives you an idea, but it wasn't. So I told my husband, let's stay one night there. And, him sleeping there one night, he's like, well, the bed has to go. That absolutely. But that's it. Your budget is over. You have no budget for this house. You'll rent it out. And when, fine. Well, that wasn't fine with me. The interior design thing kicked in. And I thought, well, I have no budget, but I have to make this work. So I went upstairs and I called two men in a truck, and I told them to take out, the upstairs game room,
the upstairs of your home,
of our own home,
the home that you
the
made
home
lovely.
I live in. And it was our home, our family home. And I sent them around and I said, okay, take those two couches and this table. And my kids came home from school that day and they're like, Mom, there's no furniture upstairs. What happened to the sofas? And I said, well, everything has to contribute, and they were not earning their keep. So they're off to the beach house to actually earn their living, I guess.
That's fabulous.
So it was a bit of a learning moment. Yeah, it was fun.
And how did they react to that?
Well, they sat on the floor and said, oh, okay, we'll watch. I said, you can manage. We have another sofa. It's fine.
Now, what did your husband? So I just wanted to actually interject. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but your husband is a successful CEO, a leader in business, used to telling people, you do this, you do that. He's a very approachable and a nice man, but he is clearly a man in charge.
Sure.
So what did he say when you just moved all the furniture out?
Well, it was kind of, again, we have a good relationship. We're best friends, but yeah, he was shocked. He didn't believe it at first. The kids were like, Dad, Mom took all the furniture. And I said, well, I made it work, didn't I? Like, this was part of the plan. And he actually was fine with that. He was a bit shocked, but he's like, oh, okay, well, okay. I think he gets me. He knows we've been married a long time, 26 or something years.
Okay.
So he gets me as much as I get him. But he was a little bit shocked, but he knows that I'm going to push back and he's going to push his way and I'm going to push mine. So we kind of meet in the middle usually, and it's great. So he kind of gave me, I'm also a bit of a DIYer. So in the first few beach houses or the first few things, I didn't always, I am also very frugal. So,
Mhm.
I would paint furniture. I have found furniture on the side of the road or, picked things up. I have no, there's, it's all good. So it's fun. He gets me. He puts up with me actually.
Oh, I think he more than puts up with you, Carolyn. I think he
Thanks.
has high regard for you as well as do I. So this first beach house wound up being successful, right?
Yes. So much so that, and I think he was surprised because, in his giving me this, I had to present this business plan, which I'd never done. Laura, I didn't go
That's
to
not your
business
background.
school. No, I've never taken a business
Your
course. I,
medicine.
yeah, I
Yeah.
know nothing about properties and this is all foreign to me. It's all been a learned and fun thing. So when I had to present this business plan, I had to present the low side, the high side. It ended up that it came out on the high side. So we went and bought more and I found more and, you know, it just grew and the rest is a little bit of
Mm.
history. So now we're at, it became where I was managing 14 properties and then grew into, the point where we have right now, we have two small sort of resort hotels with 18 units. And, and for a long time, I was doing everything myself. Currently, I have, hired a property manager who helps with the hotels and we have staff there and it's become a business. It's evolved
Right.
and so it's crazy, right?
Yeah, that's fabulous. So the transition from the more of the discrete properties all around to bringing most of them, you still have some kicking around out there, but
Yeah.
to bringing most of them to apply that to this property, I'd
Mhm.
love for you to tell us what you did because honestly, I think very few people know about this particular tax code. And certainly, I don't know if many people think about applying it the way you applied it and the way you went into it and did it all by yourself, which was unbelievable.
Well, thanks. Yeah, so I think you're referring to the 1031 exchange
Hmm.
where you have essentially 45 days to secure another property after selling some property, right? So we decided, the market was hot. This was probably one of my most challenging moments, I guess, or in what we did. So the market was hot. Everybody a couple years ago was selling things and, the profits were great. You made all this money, proud moment. But to do a 1031 exchange, suddenly you now have to, you're basically deferring taxes and rolling it into the next one, which is a great plan, except you couldn't buy anything a couple years ago. We put in offers. It was crazy times, unprecedented, like everything. That word's overused these days, but it was unprecedented time where suddenly you can't buy a property. We put in offers on many properties and finally it was 4 a.m. and we were a few days away from running out of time to buy something. And it was 4 a.m. one morning and I was scouring the market in bed as I'm sleeping, but looking for the right property, finally finding this property. It was in receivership. That's a whole other story. But there was these two little hotels and I thought, I'd looked at them before, but suddenly they started to make sense as I'm Google Earthing and everything's making sense. So we went in, looked at them and we put in an offer and I there's so many little stories within this story that
I
it's
know.
hard to kind of remember, but even the offer was crazy. I had put in this offer and they sent back their contract, which was a total contract I'd never seen before. And I had 1 hour to sign it and I didn't have a lawyer present. My husband, nobody was around. And this was a huge proposition. And I had to decide to sign it without anybody else. So this was make or break. So I signed it because I knew also that I could get out of it with the 3-day inspection. So
Okay.
I wasn't crazy.
Okay.
But anyway, we did
Because
this.
we I do want to tell those at home not to try
No,
this.
don't do that.
Get yourself a lawyer,
Yes, yes.
especially when it's a, I mean, it was a pretty
That was a
large
big, that was a
purchase.
large purchase.
And it wasn't just a one house that you were moving into that. There was more than one house that you sold, right?
oh yeah, there was like five or three or four properties that we'd sold. And in with that became, it ended up being 1031, two 1031 exchanges with different pockets of property within each one. And then we ended up doing a construction exchange on one, which is where you spend money out of this pool of cash.
The money gets held in like an escrow,
an
type of
escrow
thing.
account, and you can make draws against that.
Right.
We did.
But Carolyn, yeah, I mean, this is not, you don't have business experience. I know for a fact that your husband at the time was very involved running a big corporation.
Yes.
And he was not assisting you with this. How did you figure all this out?
This is another thing you're going to tell people not to do, but the internet is great. A lot of information. I just read a lot. I talked to a lot. I really delved into it, so much so that there were so many intricacies that I talked to the people at the 1031 exchange. They knew me, and it was very complicated. It was very complicated because you're kind of you're dealing in these big entities of funds where you're kind of maneuvering this money and making it work, and it was complicated. But on top of that, during the process, we had intended to buy the two hotels together, and they were selling them together, and it wasn't kind of working. They only agreed to sell the one, and for the price that we wanted. We eventually ended up going back to purchase the other one. There was a lot going on. It was very complicated. I don't know how much detail you would want to hear about, but
Well, yeah, so some of that has to do also with negotiating skills as well, right?
yeah.
And I've seen you in action, and you don't take no for an answer. One of the things that I admire about you, especially as a woman, when a man says, "No, don't worry your pretty little head," or "No, you can't ask that," you go back. I mean, even if you don't know, well, why can't I do that?
Yeah.
What gives you that kind of stamina to do that? Do you know? Because there's so many women that would just coil.
Well, it's funny because, that thought of, being a woman, is it a help or a hindrance? And it's both, right? I mean, I've definitely come across many. So in this field, I work, I deal with a lot of contractors, electricians, plumbers, people in finance, people in law offices, and everywhere. And so sometimes, yeah, being a woman, it's, they don't expect much from me, maybe, especially if it's in an area, electrician or somewhere that they don't expect me to know anything. And I guess I've learned a lot in doing what I do. So when I show that I know something, sometimes I get that surprise moment, or, you gain that respect again. And it's kind of funny. And sometimes I've even come across it where people will say, is your husband okay with that? Do you need to talk to your husband first? And I'm thinking, well, do you have to ask your wife? Where's your wife? Like, would she be okay with you asking me that? That's what I want to say. I've never said that, but it's funny. I had an occasion, and one particular thing comes to mind where we had, I had this house that I was fixing up, and it was one house from the beach, and the guy who owned the house on the beach was this big successful lawyer. I didn't know that though until I showed up one day, and I had my tree guys who I knew pretty well. The team had worked for me before on other properties. They were trimming trees, and I had a fence going in the next day, and I had a permit for that. I'd done a survey. I'd even walked the survey. I'd walked the property with the surveyor twice to make sure, because I knew that the property I was impinging on was theirs, and I didn't even think I bought that piece. So I was like, are you sure? Anyway, I came to the property, and here's this lawyer yelling at me, yelling at the guys who are doing the job for me. And I mean, irate. He was telling me he was suing me. He's a lawyer. He's going to sue me. I owe him already $20,000 or 50,000 for the damages. And he is, I have no right, and I am wrong. And, I'm absolutely wrong. And I thought, well, okay, but I'm sending you right now my survey, and here's my permit, and stop talking. These are the people I've hired, so you can talk to me, but they work for me. So please stop bothering them.
Right.
We're going to carry on, and we're going to keep doing what we're doing here. And if I'm wrong, you will sue me. And I guess that's okay. But I'm very confident that I am correct. And I'm just going to carry on. And I appreciate everything you're doing. And he was so mad and so upset with me. But he walked away and stomped off. And then a couple of days later, came back and apologized, which was big of him. And he was very respectful of me. And we had a whole great conversation and great relationship. And he turned out to be a very nice man. But it was that moment of, maybe not respecting me, not appreciating that I might actually know what I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And who was I to tell him that, so that was fun in a way, but it was challenging. It's hard to stand your ground and really say, you know what, I am not going to let you bully me. I am confident in what I'm doing, and I'm just going to keep going.
Right. Well, see, and so that's part of I think what has contributed so much to your success is, I mean, not aside from your persistence and your negotiating skills and all those other elements that we're talking about, which are really softer, you really have taken the role of not just acquiring the property, and doing the analysis to determine whether the property is a good business decision or not, which a lot of people don't do. But secondly, yes, decorating the property, but not just decorating it in terms of, oh, let's buy this new couch. You've been operating as GC, as the general contractor in a lot of these acquisitions as well, where, most people would bring in a general contractor or a project manager to coordinate all these different moving parts. I mean, you're putting pools in underground, underneath homes, and you've done some really very interesting things that I don't even know if the average person would even envision it, but you've been able to coordinate it and work with all the different folks, which is not so easy, right?
Yeah, no. And I think the property you're talking about is, I call it my baby, that one. That one was definitely the biggest learning for me in that regard, in terms of doing things. So we found this property. Well, I found this property. My husband actually said we're not looking for any more property anymore. So that was fine. But I was always looking, because you just do. So this property on Anna Maria Island came up, and I had my eye on it, and it finally had dropped in price. So I said, you know what, let's go for a drive. And oh, look at this. I've had my eye on this. Let's take a look. Let me show you this thing. And so it turned out it was a duplex, and it was a mess, but it had great potential. It was, a great piece of land on a great island that was, just a good spot to be. Great. So the price point was now at a more reasonable price, but being that it was such a mess, and the realtor told me that you don't even try to have pools here. You can't have them. Everybody's been told no. So I thought, okay, well, no to me just means why. Let's go find the why not, and let's see what we can do with that. So we had an inspection, and I brought in pool people, and they said, you can have a pool. Oh, great. Okay. So there was a dividing line in the backyard so this is even better, because, for property, these were a duplex with a condoed lot. So I could sell them separately. They were already condoed, which was great because I could sell them, but it also meant there was a property line running down the middle. So the pool people came back and said, actually, you can't put a pool in, but I'd already purchased it. So now I'm stuck with a property that is going to be a problem. But that was problem number one. Problem number two was that I had a contractor who I thought was a contractor who wasn't, another lesson that never fought. No, don't do what I did. But so this contractor, I had to basically take away the role of contractor, and I GC'd the project myself. I went back to the drawing board. That's where my interior design, thing kicked in. I designed some pools that, instead of, I worked within the parameters. I found out what the rules were on putting pools in, and I drew up some pools that went under the house and just changed basically I designed the pools and went back and said, here's the pools. These should work. I'm not paying a penny more because you've already basically told me I could have pools. And so worked out well. So here we are, we've got these two pools going in. I GC'd the project myself, learned a lot, worked with a lot of people. And it was great. So that was a huge experience, huge learning.
And I think that probably a lot of your success is that you've chosen to embed yourself in the process. You don't just say, okay, I'm going to hire people and just allow them to go off and do their thing. You're babysitting it. You're paying attention. You're going back and making sure that people deliver as they say they're going to deliver, and that they've thought through their choices. I know, in fact, somebody that I've been working with fairly recently who on Anna Maria Island has a house there, and she's actually ready to throw in the towel, never to own a property ever again in Anna Maria. She can't deal with the bureaucracy of the city. She can't deal with all the different, she's had so many people come in and tell her one thing and they didn't materialize. She's fired this one, hired that one, really, really had a lot of difficulty. And yet somehow you were able to traverse all that. And I'm not saying, I mean, maybe the experience truly was more difficult for her than for you. I don't know.
Sure.
But I do know that you would have caught it like that because you were always so on top of it. And I think in the real estate market with what's going on, you can't just hire people and delegate and just say, okay, you go off and I trust that everything's going to be okay. You really do have to pay attention.
You do. You're right. I mean, you not only have to pay attention, but I think you have to, in my experience anyway, I say this to my husband all the time. It's kind of frustrating because you don't only have to pay attention, but you have to consistently call people back and keep on top of them. But you have to do that properly because, people are people and they don't want to be bothered all the time. So you have to do it in the right way where they want, I want people who want to be working with me or for me or together. It's sort of like a team, I need you to help me. Can we do this together? Like, I had a handyman who worked with me for years and years, and he was great. He's retired now, but I appreciated him as much as he appreciated me. And he'd always said that,
Excuse me.
no, of course, he'd always appreciate that I appreciated him too. So it's a team. And even with getting things done, I remember one property I had on Anna Maria Island. When you say it's hard to get things done, it is impossible to get things done. I mean, Anna Maria Island is a Saturday check-in and check-out. It's a total vacation island. Everybody there with the property to rent it's on never go to Anna Maria on Saturday. Just FYI for everyone out there. If you want to go to the beach, do not go to that island on a Saturday because that's when everybody changes over. So it's crazy. And it's definitely a vacation spot. With that in mind, getting anyone to help you do anything is near impossible. I had this property there that it was a vacation rental, but I found that it was on a busy street, and it was right at the curve where if you're walking to the beach access, you are going to possibly get killed because the cars are just racing around the corner. So I thought, well, we really need a crosswalk here. Absolutely. Don't know why there isn't one. So, I started working on that. I called the city. I took pictures. I called the mayor. I I talked to them. Turns out the mayor had actually grown up on that street, and she was in agreement that it is a strange spot for a beach access when you can't cross. And so they were looking into that. When the garbage on Anna Maria is an issue, because oftentimes you've got the garbage on the Saturday checkouts. The garbage men are, anyway, it's a long story, but they're supposed to pick it up and put it back to your door, and they don't. And so I spoke to the commissioner, and he came out. He was great. I have his number. He went out on the garbage truck and he called me and he said, Carolyn, I'm just outside your house. And you're right, because I'm having the same problem. So, we were working together to figure this out, and he was wonderful. But sometimes I think you just have to take the put the onus on yourself and be accountable for something and just get it done. Right? Just get
yes,
it done.
Yes. Well, accountability.
Accountability.
Big thing.
Right. Yeah. Because no one's going to do it for you. So just, make it happen.
Yeah, that's false. Just wonderful stories. So I do want to back up, because at one point you did tell me that you thought that I was going to say Googling things was bad. I don't believe Googling things are bad. I think that you can get a lot of information through that process. I mean, gee, I just wish we had that kind of information at our fingertips when I was a kid and I was going to school. We had to go, we actually had to go to the library.
I remember. I was there. Yeah, I remember.
But yeah, there is a lot of information. The thing is that you have to be smart about how you use that information as well, right?
Definitely.
So you want to get information, you want to look at the sources of the information, you want to compare the sources and compare the different stories that you're getting so that you can actually put it all together and come up with a reasonable answer to your question. It's not just Googling and taking the first thing that you get and running with it. So I hope in these days of AI and what's happening, the information doesn't start becoming even less reliable, but it's on us to make sure when we use that as a resource that we're digging into exactly where is this information coming from, and
you're
checking it.
right. I think probably that came from me thinking more in the medical side of my world, where people Google things and get themselves in trouble. I do that too, but
but again, you look at numerous resources. You look at different sources.
Exactly. It's all out there. And it kind of reminds me of another story, if I could.
Yeah.
It's just I had this. So you're right. It can be super useful. And in one instant that comes to mind is, I had this tenant who sadly during COVID, we couldn't go into a lot of apartment units or places to check on things. So this poor gentleman had been living in our apartment he was kind of hoarding, but it was all, and I'm clearly not going to mention any names. It was a sad state. There was a wellness check done, and he was the paramedics thought that he was actually had passed in the house. He didn't, thank God, and he is fine. But he had somewhat of a hoarding situation where, there was beer cans and cases to the ceiling. You could not walk in the house. It was just horrific. Long story short, because I don't want to get into the details of his side, he was a wonderful man. Just again, some mental things going on and health issues that, but he's fine. So I had to deal with his family, though. I had to find his family. I had to find that, his son came down, helped with this. This place was kind of ruined. He kind of ruined the apartment in this thing. Had to get mitigators and junk people in. So the reason I bring that up with the internet is because suddenly I'm faced with this situation where I have to go into the unit to deal with it. but it's his apartment, but he's not able to vacate it legally. So from a legal standpoint, what do you do? Being a landlord, I'm not allowed to just enter this property. So the internet came into effect where I spent hours and hours and hours figuring out what legally, because I did call a lawyer, an attorney's office, and even they couldn't really tell me specifically what to do, because it's a gray area. It's very much the tenant's right. I can't go in. So I located his family, and I was able to decipher to figure out that if I could give them a surrender, have his son have power of attorney for him, and then he could sign off that he surrendered the property to me and he was vacating it. So that's where the internet came in very, very handy, because this was a big thing. I didn't know anyone else who had rented property who had come under something like that, where I need to get in and I have to empty all his possessions out. I have to clean the apartment and essentially evict him, because you can't really evict someone when they have a mental. So it was complicated, but that's where the internet, I got a lot of great information, and I was safely, and it worked. So
Did you get attorneys involved or?
no, I'm sorry, Laura, I did not. But I did in a sense, because I spoke to I spoke to an attorney I have an attorney who draws up my leases. So you'll be happy to know that I do use an attorney office to draw up the actual lease, and they do guide you when you have problems like that. In that particular case, they weren't able to give me, there's no guarantees either. Like, it can go this way, it can go that way. His family was on board, everything was fine. I did not, the attorneys are only with you so far on those cases, unless you want to spend a ton of money and have them do everything.
Right.
But as you know, I'm kind of a do-it-yourselfer, so
In everything.
everything. So,
but you know what? I mean, if in fact you spend the time to really research it, and I know that you do, and really, really try to understand all the risks associated with what you do. I mean, most people don't have the energy or the wherewithal to do that. And that's why for most people, I would say, no, get yourself an attorney and,
I would
try to get
agree.
the support. So you're just a unique
Crazy,
animal.
a little bit crazy. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Definitely get an attorney. We do use an attorney for many things. Just on some cases, you kind of have to weigh, and in sometimes there's no time. In that particular case, this was sort of an emergency. I mean, this was a disaster. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, if I showed you a picture, you would not. I had to get in there right away. There really was not time for me to let what was there sit there. Let's just say that. So
Okay.
sometimes time is of the essence, and you do what you have to do.
Mhm.
I mean, even going back to that 1031 exchange property, there was a lot of timing issues where decisions had to be made. And I didn't have I didn't have time to,
Right.
again, don't do that. Nobody should do. I might be one of those.
I did this. I was
I-
very successful, but don't do that.
I might be one of those examples where it's sort of like, those captions, don't try this at home goes. But no, I mean, I definitely take precautions. I'm very careful. You know me. I don't speed. I'm very much a rule follower. So I know, I guess when you research things and you talk to enough people and you learn, you kind of know where you need the help and where you're okay. And
Right.
sometimes you just are okay to do what you're doing.
And I know you as an extremely thoughtful person that actually processes things and thinks through things and looks at, okay, what's the worst thing that can happen? What's the best thing that can happen? And you evaluate it. You don't just impulsively make these decisions. So I think that's, really important.
I thank you for saying that. I mean, yeah, I certainly think so. I try to anyway, and I do read a lot, especially, like I said before, I don't have a business degree. I don't know. I didn't come into this with a plan. I didn't come into this knowing anything about it. So that kind of, it's sort of when the learning curve, when you start off and you think, oh, this is going to be easy. I know this is easy. I can do this. And then you start to learn a little bit more. And then you go through that moment of, oh, I can't do this. I don't know anything about any of this. And then you go back to the research, and then you go back to reading and learning and asking and talking to people. At least that's what I did. So I've been building this and learning, if you will, all the way through.
Right.
And, sometimes I don't even, I know you and even my husband sort of get upset with me because people will say to me, what do you do for a living? Or what do you do? And I think, oh, I don't have a job. I just,
You're an entrepreneur.
and
You own a hotel.
I know, but it's sort of, it's funny how that hasn't been my first go-to, because it evolved slowly, and it wasn't something I set out to do necessarily to do that. So it is funny. I'm correcting myself all the time to say, that I'm a property manager, or I run my own business, or I do whatever. I think at first my friends may have thought I was doing something that I shouldn't have been, because suddenly I was always busy. I was too busy to go out for lunch. I'm too busy. I can't. I've got to go here or there. I didn't start off telling people that, I bought this property or that property, or I'm flipping a house, or I'm doing this, because it just, at first it might have even seemed a little bit, not arrogant, but maybe pretentious to say that, I bought these houses, like, and I didn't want to have to explain it. So a lot of it was just sort of done quietly and not really.
Right. But it all built on each other, and to the point where not just, the money as well as your expertise all kept piling on top of each other, to the point where you became, I don't know if you had started out buying a hotel, if you would be so comfortable.
No.
I think you had to go through that whole process to get there, which is actually such a wonderful learning experience, and something that if I could tell our youngest daughters, and I'm sure there's other young women who feel like they have to know exactly what they're doing for the rest of their lives, and they need to know it now, that sometimes you just start taking a step and doing something that interests you. You liked decorating. So it was something that interested you, and you did well at it. And then you did something else, and it just built to the point where you are a successful entrepreneur, hotel, real estate maven, even though you might not see yourself that way. And it's from that slow, deliberate process of just doing a little bit at a time.
Right.
So before we actually bring this to a close, is there anything, one thing that you would give in terms of advice to women that you've learned along the way? Is there one thing you wanted to share?
Well, I guess the biggest thing is, just do it. Just start, find your passion, find something that you like. And it could be anything from, if you enjoy gardening, maybe you open a flower shop, or, if you like cooking, maybe you start selling cupcakes somewhere. I don't know, but everybody has their own passions they may not have even known about. And have no fear, be responsible and, do your homework, but take the first step. Just take that first step. And sometimes you don't even know that you're going to end up where you end up. I had no idea I would end up here ever, like not in a million years. And sometimes, like I said, I don't even acknowledge that I am here, but here I am. So yeah, don't fear, be confident, and just trust yourself, trust the process, and just take the first step.
Great advice, Carolyn. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I know that there are women that are going to enjoy your story. So
well, thank you. I appreciate it, Dr. Laura. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Money Matriarchs with Dr. Laura Mattia. If you like what you've heard and found it helpful, Please like and subscribe to the show so we can inspire all women to harness the power of money for good. Stay inspired, and we hope you'll join us again in the next episode of Money Matriarchs.